My name is Glen Grant. My company is HRFX Consulting Incorporated. We work with small businesses anywhere from 1 employee up to 200 employees, helping with what we see as their most valuable assets, their employees. Managing business can be challenging. Managing employees are even more challenging in many aspects as well too. Our role is to help business owners and managers become more efficient in managing their people. As you begin to rate your policy in your handbook around discipline, the more succinct you are in your expectations, the more clear you are on your policies, the more clear you are as far as what the expected outcomes may be, the easier your disciplinary action is going to become going forward. If employees have clear expectations of what their performance behaviors, acceptable behaviors are going to be, you can then manage to those acceptable behaviors. The less clear you are, the more ambiguity, the less consistent that you are, the more challenges you're going to have as you begin to discipline behaviors. So reflect on your business and think about what are some of the key behaviors or challenges you have in the past. Absenteeism, lateness, theft, inappropriate work methods, not meeting performance expectations. What are some of the keys, issues you've had previously with previous employees, and how can you document that within your handbook such that you're clear what the expectations are, and if those expectations are met, what the outcomes are going to be as part of it. Behavior is really simply holding employees accountable to the expectations set. It shouldn't be a punishment. It shouldn't be a negative experience. Ideally, a simple reminder that your expectations are this, here's what you did, we need you to go back to meet our expectations. So while it can often be emotionally charged conversation, it can be very passionate, it can be difficult conversation to have, the reality is it shouldn't be. Here's our expectations. Expectations weren't met. We'd like you to get back to meet our expectations, and how are we going to do that? Understanding that's not always the reality of what goes on in the business. So as you develop your handbook and your policies and around discipline, is the more clear you are, the better expectations you set start off with, the easier discipline becomes going forward. As you establish a new employee handbook and you're looking at discipline and progressive discipline, key areas to touch on is what are your steps in the process. So how are you going to address it? What are the outcomes so the employee knows the expectations? We talked about progressive discipline being a verbal, a written, and then potential termination, suspension, or demotion. So those are the 3 steps that are going to take place. You may want to outline key things that are important to your business as far as what are immediate just cause terminations, theft, inappropriate use of vehicle, unsafe work methods, things like that. That these are clearly things that go from verbal warning right to termination. That's severe. You want to be able to address how the conversations are going to happen as well too, meaning should you fail to meet these expectations, you will, within 24 hours, you can expect to have a meeting or conversation with your supervisor or manager. Final comment is just a reminder for progressive discipline is it goes from verbal to written to potential termination. The context or severity of that's going to be considered from the length of service the employees work for you, the amount of time between incidences, and also severity of the incidents as well too. Termination doesn't have to be the last step. It can be. Reducing responsibility, suspensions, this kind of things are options as well to consider as well too. But you want to clearly outline that as a 3rd step, and then you as the business owner or manager then have the flexibility to be able to manage that based on the individual issues. When you're managing for performance, one of the key areas to understand is employees got to know what the expected performance is. Do they have the training to meet that performance, and as it consistently applied within your organization? So as you're training a new employee coming in, or you've got an existing employee that's taking on different responsibility, have you given them the tools to be successful? And this is often where I think as a business owner or manager, you've got to take that ownership and responsibility and say, yes, I've given them the tools to be able to do it. As a business owner or manager, you can do it, but have you clearly communicated what the expectations are? Do they have the tools? Have they had a reasonable amount of time to be able to understand and learn those methods and be able to use them effectively? When you're disciplining around performance, you want to have the context around the conversation to, yes, they can show they have the capability to do it, they have the capacity to be able to do it, they have the training, and they have demonstrated their behavior beforehand. Then you begin to get into the progressive discipline as far as a verbal, written, and potential termination as a result of it. But you want to review that, like I said, the training aspect, conversation with employee, are they aware, do they have the tools, has it been demonstrated clearly that they can do it, before you start getting into the verbal, written, and then potential termination at that point. When disciplining for severe misconduct, an example might be theft, violence in the workplace, clearly unsafe work methods, this sort of thing, which is a clear misconduct. There is justification as the employer that they have violated the relationship such that it may lead to immediate termination, or a verbal warning, skipping the written, and then going to termination if the example happens again. You have to look at the context of the issue, the effect on the business, and was it clearly communicated to the employer that kind of behavior was not acceptable. And this goes back to what's contained in your handbook. So what, an example would be if you're handling cash. What are clearly, here's the operating methods about how we handle cash, here's what the expectations are, it's going to be balanced by the end of the day, and if it's not, here's what the consequences are. Versus an unwritten policy, unwritten rule, and at the end of the week my balance doesn't add up and I'm out $50. So is that theft or just poor work methods on my behalf? If it hasn't been explained, hasn't been trained, I can't get into a disciplinary process unless that's clearly been demonstrated to me that I understand it, and I've demonstrated I can do those sort of things going forward as well. As you look at putting together a disciplinary program, or as a reminder for what we've talked about today, there's 4 key areas that you want to be able to focus on when you have a disciplinary process in place. One is focusing on facts and figures, not using generalized comments. Second thing is making it direct to the individual, not making it personal. The third is following up right away after incidents, or as soon as possible after an incident happens. And the fourth comment is document, document, document. And what I mean by that is you always want to be making notes and keeping them. So if you need to refer back to them that employee A was absent, this day we had a conversation and this happened 30 days ago, you want to be able to reflect on that specific date. I don't believe in writing pages and pages of document notes, a quick note saying I spoke with employee A in regards to this, he committed to being here on time. That's enough to be able to have that, to be able to refer back to for going forward. The key thing that we see in small businesses is where do they keep that information and can they easily access it? So is there an employee file? Do you have a handbook which has all the employees' names on it? You can make notes to it. So what are you doing around your documentation to be able to move forward? The important thing is as you move through the progressive discipline and going to look at termination, if you haven't documented it or haven't provided specific dates, the less clear that is, the less clear your ability to terminate for causes as well too. As you develop your policies and as you get your handbook into the workplace and create more expectations, as an HR professional, disciplinary procedures they're not fun to get involved into. They are often emotionally charged. They are challenging at various times because they're difficult conversations to have. That said, the most successful businesses we've seen, or that I work with, have clear expectations. They're the accountability, whether it's latencies, absentees, and performance, are very clearly established ahead of time. Conversations happen very regularly and formally. A disciplinary discussion doesn't have to be stop everything, come to my office, sit down, have that difficult conversation face to face. It can be, hey, can I talk to you for a second? I need you to do this. You okay doing that? Yep, got it, great. and that's it, right? Make a note of it afterwards, but the more informal conversations and coaching you can give, the less of those difficult, awkward, emotionally charged conversations are going to happen going forward. If you create a culture where accountability is part of it, so people clearly know what they're accountable for, they work together as a team, if certain numbers or expectations are met, ideally it's the co-employees that are helping the other employee understand what the expectations are. Can we help you? How do we get you here on time? So it's not even coming to you, it's being managed within the team environment. That's ideally what we want to do, but that takes time to be able to get to that sort of thing. If you're consistent, if you're clear, if you are managing effectively and actually managing the business and the people versus being in the business, was one of the challenges as a smaller business. Disciplinary shouldn't be a big issue. It's when you don't address them and suddenly items that were very small become very large. Right, and then I haven't talked to this employee about this for 6 months. Now I've got to have this awkward conversation. Had you addressed it 6 months earlier, that conversation would disappear. So, disciplinary is important to have. A process is important to have. Setting expectations is important to have. But the more proactive you are, I think the less challenging that process becomes going forward, and becomes part of your everyday norm versus being those awkward and difficult conversations going forward.